All righty. Is this working? All right. I'm glad to know it's working. So, uh, silly idea late last night, like 3 a.m. I figured, hey, with Synth Fest coming up and with what I did last year with Robbie, I thought maybe I would do some little geeky FM thing for that. So, totally flying without a net here. I have something planned, and then other than that, until I run out of time, it's just going to be sort of a stream of consciousness of things, but based around a couple of neat things that basically you can do with FM or phase modulation, playing with phases, because that's what basically this is kind of going to be all about. One of the reasons why it's very useful is that a lot of people don't know that playing around with the phases and stuff is what um, allows you to do a lot of virtual analog reconstructions in FM. So I'm going to base it around this SY99 patch. And if things go well, I will come around to the Essence FM just because the interface is a lot cooler to look at than, you know, these pages on the SY99. Anyway, so I guess where I'm going to go is sort of deconstruct this patch to show how we basically do stuff to create virtual analog. So we're going to start with some basics here. I'm going to actually go to this version here, and we're going to call up the first part. And isolate out what we've got going here. So I've got this algorithm of 2 stacks of 3, and it's essentially going to be doing what I call saw core pulse width modulation, meaning I'm going to use each of the stacks to create a sawtooth wave, and we're going to play with their phase and their polarity to do some analog behaviors that are basically the same as pulse width modulation. In a prior video, I had shown how to actually construct pulse width modulation out of 3 operators. But this one is a better, I won't say better, it's a different approach that actually creates detuning and pulse width mod all in one. So what I've done is I've muted ops 4, 5, and 6 here. And we're just going to be playing right now with the first stack of 1, 2, and 3. Let me kill the effects there. Sorry. So what I've done here is essentially created a basic FM square wave. And how I've done it is essentially self-feedback on a single operator. So operator 2 is our basically our audio source here. You're going to see in our patching, I've got operator 2 self-feedback to itself. In the other stack, I have operator 6. 3 I have doing something special I'll show later. But the important thing is we've got self-feedback. The amount is 7. And as I've shown in a lot of other videos, that's how I basically create, you create sawtooth waves in FM. You can also do it with a 1-to-1 ratio setting in a 2-op stack. So this is just a simple way. Now, what am I doing with the fact that I am using it on the second operator, not on operator 1, and what's going on with operator 1? So as I said, this is going to be demonstrating a whole bunch of phase tricks and waveform inversion stuff, and that's why I have it in this number 2 position, because I'm actually using operator 1 as a fixed frequency at 0 hertz. So basically, you can think of this as a sort of a, you can think of this as sort of a wave shaper, and I'm going to be using this to do basically the phase tricks that let you do sort of an analog oscillator modeling here. So just to show you kind of what happens typically with fixed frequencies, you'll use low numbers here to make this little pseudo chorus effect. That's well known since the DX7 days on how you could sort of thicken up a sound. Some people ask, well, what does that type of fixed frequency carrier do? So let me detour into that. This is all through 0 FM, which means at any given modulation index, the harmonics you create that are the negative sidebands fold back over into the positive realm and mix with the ones that are there. Typically, if you have fixed ratios, what that'll mean is that harmonics will be the volume of the negative harmonic that comes as a sum and difference situation. What basically happens when you use a 1 hertz fixed frequency, your sidebands will be 1 hertz plus and minus all your harmonics. So all your harmonics essentially are going to beat by 2 times this frequency. So you're going to create one sideband, let's say at A440, it's going to be at 449. I'm sorry, at A440, you're going to have one at 439 and one at 441, and that's what you're hearing. Now, the reason why that sounds completely different than detuned oscillators is because every harmonic is off by 2 hertz, as opposed to in 2 oscillators detuned, every octave, the beating doubles in the harmonics. And that's why detuned oscillators sound a heck of a lot nicer than that. Anyway, digressed a little. Like I said, I'm keeping this on the 0 frequency because later on, what we're going to be doing, we're going to be changing this phase parameter to basically vary our interactions with our other stack. Okay, so our other stack, 4, 5, and 6, I have set up a little differently in that I have a 1 ratio carrier. I've got my fixed frequency in the middle. Then my modulator with the feedback that I showed you earlier is on the top. And again, that's because this phase relationship between the 2 stacks, I want to have the ability to shift them linearly and invert them. So what does that all mean, and why am I doing all this kind of stuff? By the way, is any of this making any sense? Give me a thumbs up, thumbs down, feedback in the chat if you don't mind. I'm going to take a sip of my soda. Cool. All right. So what we're going to do here is going to make these two sawtooth waves. So let me back up a little bit. So here's look at the scope. This is our operator 1, 2, 3. And this is our operators 4, 5, and 6. So that's a good question, Keith. I don't know. Maybe it's the one with the head exploding. All right, so put these all on at once. Okay, since they're the same waveform and all their phases are aligned, we're going to get the same wave at twice the amplitude. So you can see how that's twice the size on the in the oscilloscope as just either half. And here's both of them. So let's start with basic phase offsets here. Okay. So we're going to go to our operator 2. And now what we're going to do is we're going to shift the phase relative to the stack of 3, 4, and 5. So I'm going to start here. And we're going to go to 64. So on the SY99, the phase is 0 to 127. So basically, this is 180 degrees shifted linearly. So let's see what we have here. If you look at the waveform on its own, of course, it's going to look the same. But now if you play it with the 4, 5, 6 stack, these guys are offset 180 degrees. So now you get the classic, what they call double sawtooth. So yes, I wish I had a pen and a paper. Actually, maybe I can pull this off. Ooh. Here we go, ad lib on the fly. So normally you have your 2 sawtooth waves like that. Let's see. Oh, there you go. All right. And if you add them when they phase line up, you just get a bigger sawtooth wave. What we're doing is we're going to offset them. Okay. Sorry, that doesn't quite fit in the screen. Let's see, maybe over here. Ah, there we go. Put it over on the essence. So now we're going to offset them. So now those guys in the same cycle are going to do this when they add up. So it's kind of like pulse, sort of like width modulation, a sawtooth wave. And basically, when you get the double sawtooth, you're going to get a lot of carrier fundamental suppression, and it's going to sound like it's an octave higher. So here's the regular. Now here's our double sawtooth. So let's go ahead and take this back down to 0. So they're phase aligned again. And now let's gradually increment the phase. So you can see the point of the other sawtooth is starting to sneak out from under the alignment of the other one. So basically, this is a form of, wave shaping, which of course on the analog synth, pulse width modulation, hard sync, and that kind of thing, cross modulation, or various types of wave shapings. And we are simply doing this between the additive sums of two sawtooth waveforms. So one of the things that's cool is, of course, is if you can modulate those in real time, then you can get changes in your timbre with various controllers and whatnot. Let me take a look at something real quick. Did I get that done? Okay, so flying without a net here. This should work. So I talked about operator 3. I'm using it to do something special. And basically, operator 3 is modulating operator 2. And I've got a sine wave here at a low fixed frequency. The phase offset's 32 just because I want it to start at the peak of the sine wave. So I'm basically using it as a cosine. So everybody says, oh, this isn't FM, it's phase modulation. The answer is yes. So why is that cool? Well, because now I want to have a real-time modulation of the phase of that operator 2. And I can do that by having a modulation index of operator 3. So let's again turn this off. Now I have it patched to the modulation wheel, the output level of operator 3 here. So when I bring it in, it's going to basically start phase shifting as an LFO on operator 2. So the stuff I showed you when I was dialing it in manually, it's going to do that continuously. Now, of course, you can't see this because it's not up against a reference. Let's turn on our other stack again. So now what we've been able to do is to create a dynamic shaping of that wave by having real-time variance in our phase offsets. So you may ask, what's next? Well, let's talk about what's next here. So basically we talked about taking two sawtooth waves and offsetting them linearly in phase, meaning across the x-axis. But now let's do something a little bit different. And now we're going to dive into what happens if you mix two sawtooth waves, but one is a standard sawtooth, but the other is a ramp or rising sawtooth. We're going to have one descending sawtooth and then one ascending sawtooth. So let's go back to our operators here, and we have our operator 1, 2, 3 stack. And we've got our descending sawtooth wave. So let's go to operator 1 here. And this is the reason why I've tucked op2 behind operator 1 is now I want to flip the y-axis of this. I want to invert the waveform. So what we're going to do is we're now going to take our rising sine wave fixed frequency carrier, and we're going to make it a descending sine wave carrier. So we're going to take this, and we're going to change this wave to 64. So now it's initially going to start in the negative phase, not the positive phase. And check this out. So we've flipped our sawtooth. It went from falling slope, to rising slope. So now, what hijinks is going to ensue when we mix this with our other wave? So, in the chat, anybody knows what happens when you mix two waveforms, assuming identical, when they're out of phase from a inverted standpoint? What do you get? Nothing, right? They phase cancel. So, why is that useful? Well, part of the reason why, yeah, exactly, Paul, that's a null. So That's because as one waveform is rising, the other one's going negative the same amount, and you get negative zero. Okay, but that's if they're starting at the same phase relationship. So then the question becomes, what happens when these two waveforms are not at the same initial phase relationship? So let's say they are offset like we did on the other example. So we get a square wave. So when you have them, these two sawtooth waves offset by half their cycle, you get a sawtooth. Two sawtooth waves will sum to become a square wave. So let's draw this up. So we have version 1, which is like this, which is the null, right? But then we have version 2, that's this, right? And so when you actually sum those parts up, what you get is, let's see if I can do this right. It's going to be half the amplitude, but you're basically going to get that. Okie dokie. So essentially, by being offset 180 degrees, the point of the negative sawtooth is half the value of the positive one until you get to the end of the cycle, where, of course, drops and then repeats. So essentially, we have found a way to create a square wave out of two sawtooth waves, one inverted and 180 degrees out of linear phase. So to show you what happens, if we take our operator 2 again and we put this at 0, what do you think is going to happen again? Okay, we basically get cancellation. Here we had two sawtooth waves, both in the same descending orientation, adding together. We flip this and invert it. Okay, we get phase cancellation. And now we're going to offset it linearly. Okay, so now we've got our square wave. So let's back this number out manually again. So essentially, by changing that x-axis offset of the ascending and descending waves, you are varying the pulse width of the resultant signal. So that's our square, and here's our narrow. Cool. So let's expand on this. So what do we want to do if we want to have real-time pulse width modulation? There's two things you can do here. And one of these is an old Rompler trick for those Romplers that gave you two sawtooth waves where they were one ramp ascending and one standard descending. Because, of course, you can't make real-time waveform changes in most Romplers. But if you have two sawtooth waves and one is a ramp going up and one's the other going down, if you go in and then detune them, okay, you're going to have a dynamic shifting in the relative phase because of the detuning. So check this out. So now, as mentioned, we can invoke Nick Bat because now we've got, ooh, pulse width modulation going on. Now, this is a very, very basic type of pulse modulation because you are essentially only going from square wave to some narrow phase of 0 and back out. So you're going square wave to thin. Technically, it will pass through DC and then back. So it's not purely really sophisticated like the other method that I showed where I can literally pulse width and then modulate from any width not controllable in the range of it. But the detuning will change the speed of it. Now, because this is a frequency-based interaction, the rate of that's going to, of course, double every octave. So let's put it back to 0 and back to our square wave. And now let's go back to a dynamic control that is actually controllable. So remember our operator 3, we've got our phase modulation of operator 2 controlled on the mod wheel. Unfortunately, you can't see me playing around with it here, but I'm going to crank it all the way. Put it at half. So now you can see I can dynamically control the depth of the effect. In addition, I can go back to my operator 2, okay, and I can choose my start point to be other than a square wave. So let's go back to, let's just pick 32. Why not? So now I'm starting in this position. So now I'm starting from approximately 1/4 width and then taking it out to thin. You can actually hear it do the through DC double tap there because of the depth on that. So that's essentially the basis of this patch. Essentially, I call it saw core pulse width modulation because it uses these interactions. So that's the abstract single oscillator version. And now we're going to expand on this a little bit and show you what happened, basically how I put together this patch to give you this big analog string sound. So I'm going to switch over to my element number 2 here. Let me bring it back to mono. So when I tweak out all that crap to use the 2 stacks as 2 separate oscillators, have the pulse width modulation interaction going back and forth between them, have offsets of the frequency version of it and the LFO version of it. Essentially, I got to stop saying that word. It'll come out sounding like this. So what I've done is mix things up to hybridize it to get a sawtooth pulse width motion thing going on. So why is this cool? Because we're going to go to this version of the patch, which is actually the finished version, and show you what happens when you get crazy with phase in a whole nother realm. Okay. So let's go to our stereo field here, turn it off. So that's our right channel. That's our element 1. This is our element 2. Play them together in mono. So now let's stereoize this thing again using phase offsets between the channels. Okay. And panning these guys out. So I'm going to take you to a sneak peek of the various size. So this is your element 1. This is element 2. And you'll see that I've offset element 2 30 pretty much across the board on all the critical operators. Okay. So these are out of phase with one another. Not quite, but almost a quarter cycle, right? Yes, I know all these jump pages. It's pretty scary. So in mono, again, here we are. Let's go back and stereoize it. So we're going to pan this channel left, this channel right. So here's our left channel. Sorry, our right. My mixer's reversed. I apologize. Now together. Now, interesting. This is going to vary for everybody's individual experience because we all are sensitive to phase slightly different. I'm going to go ahead and flop these around. So we're going to put element 1 on right and this one on left. Now you would think you may or may not notice a difference in this, but let's play one note. God, I hope you haven't been hearing mono this whole time, because if I not, then I really screwed this up, Tracker Jack. Let's see. Where would I find that in the settings, all you very skilled people out there? I'm showing stereo on my monitor feed. Oh, well, looks. Let me just ask a simple question. Are we hearing that on one channel only, or is that a mono signal right now? Thank you, Tracker Jack. Okay. All right. Back to the square here. Let's see why that is happening. Well, I guess we're going to miss this part of the program because I don't think I can correct it because I never remember where the frickin' settings for that are. They're in some Zoom page somewhere. Anyway, the point is, what I was going to show you is that what's interesting is when you phase offset a right and left channel, the stereo field, okay, will be perceived differently depending on which one's right and which one's left. One of them will have a narrower field, and one will, if with the 30 So in this example, what I was trying to show you is that with the element 2 phase shifted 30, sorry, a quarter cycle relative to the other channel, that when it's panned left and the other's right, you have a nice tight stereo field. But if you actually switch the channels, it goes to a very wide one. Anyway, so this is the type of stuff, for those who don't know, that went into developing the code that drives the AN1X. Some of you have heard that the AN1X actually uses FM. I want to be clear that that has not necessarily to do with the digital filter emulations. That has to do with the core oscillator behaviors. So all the waveforms, the hard sync, and the pulse width modulation are in fact generated with phase modulation techniques. They're a little more sophisticated than what I have here on the SY99 because I have built my complex waves out of typical FM interactions. But you can do this a lot more efficiently if you start with some complex waves. So I'm going to pop on over to the Essence FM for a moment. So let me kill this. Turn on the volume. And let's go over. All right, so we're going to go over to the Essence. Give me a second. Gotta move my chair. Okay, so I'm sorry it's a little blurry. It'll focus on my hand here in a second and pick up the screen a little better. So I've set up a basic 3-stack algorithm here. And I'm going to replicate some of the stuff that we did on the SY99. And this is kind of how it was done in the AN1X. So let's. All right. So what I'm going to do here, we're going to start on operator 4. And I'm going to dial up basically a sawtooth wave. So that's a sawtooth wave I have on op4. I don't have any modulation index. That's just a straightforward complex wave. Now in operator 5, I'm going to put the inverted version of that. So now, mixed together, we have our null. So now we're going to offset the phase of one against the other. So, cheater's way, but again, that's the exact same phenomenon. Now, there's a couple of things that are kind of cool, all right, with this, because that's 2 operators and that's just straightforward mixing. So let me show you the version of this that I did on a video very, very long ago that actually uses true phase modulation math to do the same thing. So let me step away from the mic a sec. I got to configure something. So now I've called up just a straightforward complex square wave on operator for here. Let's start with this one. This is actually a nice harsh full harmonic. Okay, so on a video number of years ago, I showed the mathematical version to do the same thing we just did with our two sawtooth waves. And that has to do with your modulator. Okay, needs to be a sawtooth wave. Okay, and if you sawtooth wave modulate a square wave, then the index controls the pulse width So again, apologize, it's not focusing right at the moment, but right here, this is our volume, aka our pulse width. I'm sorry, our modulation index. So the reason why you're hearing that do that modulation, you can see there's a frequency thing here. So let me fix that. Okay. So okay. So that's the actual mathematical version of it. Let's do something a little more fun. Well, maybe not more fun, but related. Let's change our modulator to the other type of sawtooth wave. All right. Sorry, let me try. Let me play this so you can actually see the damn screen. So you hear what's going on there? That's oscillator sync. So what we've done by changing our modulator to the other type of sawtooth wave and offsetting it relative to the other one, we've actually created the hard sync behavior. Let me put that on an envelope so I don't have to have my hand blocking the screen here. So again, that's a mathematical phase shifting relationship. And if you take a look of what hard sync actually does by resetting periods of the original waveform against a master clock, essentially what it does, it creates all those weird harmonics because you have non-energy resets of the waveform, and it is pretty cool stuff. So, by the way, not to contradict Mr. Daft, but this Essence FM is not a scam. Anyway, let's see. I think that's all I had on the program for today. just because it's fun stuff. I'm going to go back to the SY99 and essentially, let's see if there's anything else fun that we can play with here. Do. We'll do this really quick because I actually did a breakdown on this thing before. This is a brute force resynthesis where I am using 3 sawtooth waves in each element. So ops 1, 3, and 5 are all self-feedback to themselves. Ops 2, 4, and 6 are all various LFOs to pitch and phase shift them against one another. I have no phase locked relationships. So I have one set up like a quick LFO. I have another one set up very slow with a non-sinusoid. I have another one set up with a sinusoid, but very slow chorus. So when you add them all together, this is just a single. This is 2. And this is a triple. It also has the Porcaro blip programmed in that as well. So our pitchy G is only doing a little bit of blip on the thing, but so boy, that's 45 minutes gone in a blast. All right, let's go back to where the hell is that? I'm sorry. It's internal. So one of the things that you can do, okay, when you have that hidden third operator doing various phase shiftings is that if you play with it outside of the strict offset ranges of 0, 90, 180 degrees, 270 degrees, various quarter cycles, the in-betweeners, okay, when you use feedback as well, starts emulating notch filter behaviors. So that's where this thing comes from. So that motion has nothing to do with filters. They're not being used on this patch. I have the high pass here purely for aliasing control. But that's the only reason why those high passes are there. So the basic patch is all yes, I always imagined how it sounds in stereo. I am so sorry I screwed that up. But maybe if there's an episode 2 of this, I will get that sussed out with the help of the online community. Anyway, so basically what I did in that patch is I built a phaser inside the patch using phase modulation. Who would have thought? Andrew, I am very disappointed that I cannot find my Polaroids that I have the V80FD prototype. I had 3 of them, and I don't know where the heck they got off to. They're probably in a box somewhere squirreled away with various other things that I did in Hamamatsu back in those days. But yeah, my the V80 was quite an interest. The V80 was quite a interesting beast. We worked on it for quite a while. It is arguably the pinnacle of what you can achieve with 6-op sinusoidal FM, because we did everything, including the pseudo drum machine sections on it. It was very correct to bin it, I hate to say, because for the average person looking for a semi-workstation keyboard, the V50 was arguably much better, because the structure of the dedicated drum machine, not dealing with polyphony across the synth engines, was actually much better. And dual 4-op is pretty good when you've got the TX81Z engine in there. But the cool thing that did come out of the V80FD prototype, that was where Yamaha started the whole concept of plug-in cards that they carried on later with the PLG boards and their later synthesizers. Anyway, that full quad. That is it for today. I hope that it was useful and not too geeky. And I'll let you guys all go about your Saturdays. If there's any last minute quick questions on anything I went over, or something else that piques your interest on what you might like for another version of this, go ahead and post it in the chat. I'm going to just be noodling around on some patches just for why not. Here you go. Here's a nice 70s, 80s vibe for you. So Bonk is from Dave Bristow. He had the phrase, what he called the squeaky bonk sounds. And those were the oddball, percussive, inharmonic, did non-musical scale type stuff with. So this is an homage to Mr. Bristow. Basically, the mod wheel brings in the big sweep. No, Steve, I typically don't. It's been a year since I did any. Most of them were just showing self-generative modular patches. But at the beginning, I mentioned that with the year anniversary of the Synth Fest presentation, I thought I'd just go ahead and give it a whirl. Oh, this is fun. So basically an analog type pad. The aftertouch brings in a fixed frequency operator so that you can bring in the grunge. There you go. Anyway, that is where we are for today. So, anyway, thank you so much for spending the time. And all righty. Cheers.